Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all have a nice lunch. So we're gonna get started. So sit back and enjoy. So thank you for taking your time today to attend this event. It's our first event actually for RT Future, and hopefully we'll have this in a couple of years later. So our first event today will be about a discussion about implementing ideas in Singapore as an international exposure. I'm Wahin, a senior year term 7 architecture and sustainable design student, and I'll be your moderator for this panel discussion today. So let me introduce you to the virtual panel who will be joining us today. So firstly, we have our Professor Erwin Viray, our ASD pillar head, Assistant Professor Sam Conrad Joyce, accompanied by his student, Kendrick Tay, an alumni who has graduated with a Master in Architecture in 2019. We also have our Adjunct Associate Professor Rene Tan, who joins with his students currently online. So before we kickstart this panel discussion, let me provide all of you with some information about the discussion we'll be having today. So students enrolled in the ASD course are actually currently provided with many working opportunities with the faculty here. And today we shall cover one aspect, which is the opportunity for international exposure. So SUTD ASD has been working to provide multiple platforms of exposure through international opportunities to get the students to know the built environment out of Singapore. Just to note, for all audience, before we begin, that if you have any questions that you would like to address during the panel discussion, please fill out your query through the Google form, which you can access by scanning the QR code or clicking the URL in the Zoom chat. So with that, we'll start off by getting Prof Erwin, Prof Sam, and also Kendrick Tay to talk about the workshop at Kyoto. We'll follow that with Prof Rene to talk about bringing students to Europe. So now, may I invite Prof Erwin and Prof Sam to continue?
Thank you, Wahin. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I presume that you are all here because you are interested to know and share with us, share the joy with us of all the wonderful things that we do at the Architecture and Sustainable Design pillar at SUTD to discover the world and also to do good things in the world. And of course, the first question is, why do we do this? In the mission of SUTD, we have to build a better world by design. And in order to build a better world by design, it means that we have to know the world. We have to know what the world needs, what are the problems of the world. And it is by knowing the world that we are able to offer solutions, innovation into the world. And secondly, our pillar's name is Architecture and Sustainable Design. And in order to understand better what architecture is and what is sustainable design, it means we have to know the life of people in different parts of the world. We have to understand culture. We have to understand how people behave, react, and then live their lives in the different places of the world. By understanding this and having this uh, opportunity to encounter people, we widen our horizons. And one place where we actually have been doing a lot of exploration is in Japan. And why Japan? Maybe there's also a personal part to that, which is myself, because I've spent over 40 years of my life in Japan, and I've lived there and learned there and worked there and taught there. And secondly, I think it's also important to recognize that Japan has a wonderful culture. The food is wonderful. I think everyone, all of us enjoy Japanese food. And then thirdly, I think in terms of the architectural profession, Japan actually leads in the discussion of what architecture is possible in the future. If we look at the Pritzker Prize, which is the Nobel Prize for Architecture, the most number of recipients or Pritzker Prize laureates are from Japan. So there are about 7 from Japan, and it's wonderful to be having the opportunity to encounter all these people who have received the prizes and see how they work and why they received the prizes. As part of the opportunity for having these encounters in Japan, we have had many trips to actually explore uh, problems and issues that we think would be useful for making architecture and then making it relevant to the everyday life. So as you see here, some of the titles of the studios and then the projects that we have done to uh, study Japan. One of them would be the Inujima Art House project, and also the Measuring the Unmeasurable, and then remote aging communities. The issues in Inujima actually offer us opportunity to understand sustainability, the sustainability of the community, sustainability of architecture, sustainability of culture, and um, life itself. And even the sustainability of economy. The trips actually involve having the students visiting famous, not only Inujima itself, Kyoto and Tokyo, uh, but also meeting people to have conversations with them, and also participating in projects by the universities in Japan, like for example, the Kyoto Institute of Technology, and then also the projects by SANAA, which is the Sejima and Nishizawa Architecture Atelier of Kazuyo Sejima. The next slide, please. So for today's sharing, I think we share with you Inujima. I mentioned already that it's an island in the Setouchi Sea. It's investigating the relationship of architecture and culture to the lens of this island location. It's called Inujima because it's shaped like a dog, and it is the smallest island among the Setouchi Islands, and it's the one that is nearest to the mainland of Honshu, and it's also in the Okayama prefecture. So we we collaborate with Kazuyo Sejima, who's the Pritzker Prize laureate uh, from Japan, who is working on this and seeing ways to actually rejuvenate the small island community. There are about 50 residents in the island with an average age of about 60 to 80 years old. And so the problem is, how do you rejuvenate this? How do you interact with the old residents? And then how do you bring in people? So I think that the students encounter this as a experience in being in the island. I have gone to the island a number of times with the students, and I think that when I ask them how was the experience, they would say it is transformative. Transformative because they realize also the encounter of not having Wi-Fi, so they are disconnected, and they seem to realize also to have that possibility of understanding how time passes in a day. And one of the wonderful and interesting experience we had was we went there in winter time, and in winter the island and the stores in the island operate in a certain time frame. And so we were going around, and then at 4 p.m. I asked them, so how are you ready for dinner or what? And they said, yes, we are. The restaurant will be open. But in winter, all the restaurants and the stores usually close at around 4 p.m. And so at about 5:30, we said, okay, we'll go. And then suddenly the students realized that there was no place actually to have food or to eat. And so they had to devise ways actually to have a good dinner that evening. And I think that it showed the resourcefulness of the students in coming up with the means to actually have a meal that evening. So besides this, I think there is also the opportunity of meeting all these very famous people, because Sejima brings in not only herself, but also people from different parts of the world, from Europe, from Netherlands, from Italy, and then even from Japan itself, because everyone is interested in what's going on in Nujima. Mr. Fukutake, who's the founder of the Venice Art House and then the Setouchi Renaissance Project, said that Sejima is an exceptional architect. But since she started doing the Inujima project, the art house project, Sejima has become an exceptional humane architect. So I think it's very wonderful experience to actually encounter the people, because they open opportunities for understanding how life is lived and how the world can be viewed. The next slide, please, Sam. And so, as I mentioned, it's about conversation. So you can see here that the students are in a picture with Kazuyo Sejima in the Garden of Life. One person who's a landscape architect and a botanist actually has been living in the island and crafting this Garden of Life. And they learn about the nature of plants and then how plants are planted. And then they also get to meet students from other schools, like from Vienna, from Italy, who actually come to help in cultivating the Garden of Life. And the students also have opportunities to visit the Museum of Carpentry by Takenaka Corporation. And I think it's the first time for them to actually work on planing the wood, cutting the wood, and they learn how the timber can actually be crafted to actually build buildings. So I think that it's an exceptional experience for them. It's an aerial view of Inujima itself. It's a very small island. You can actually go around and walk around the island in 30 minutes. Thank you. Next one, please. And so here we have photographs, collection of photographs of the students' activities, and then some architectural features that are in the island that are works by famous architects. So one of them would be like the Japanese architect Sosuke Fujimoto. And then also you have that famous pumpkin by Yayoi Kusama. And then besides seeing all this, the students also work on helping clear the ground or helping in the restoration of some of the structures. So they learn how to build things and put things together, while also encountering some of the residents and then some of the tourists or visitors who come to the island and engage in a conversation. And so with this project, the students actually are able to help in the regeneration of the island. At the moment, I heard that there are 3 new residents of the island. So I think that's wonderful. And then among the residents, there was a recent birth of a little boy. So I think that's also a wonderful phenomena in the island. Thank you. The next one, please. So I think that architecture itself, studying architecture is going beyond the classroom. It is about broadening our perspectives and being sensitive culturally and being conscious of a site and its identity to come up with good designs and response to the issues that are in front of us. So Inujima offers that possibility. One point also that would come is that because of COVID-19, we are restricted with our possibilities of really going out. But I think that it's not really a limitation, but it's also a possibility, because in the previous term, we did a studio that actually makes possible the exploration of how we can go to places like we can go to Rome or bring Rome to Singapore to actually experience these places and offer solutions to the sustainable issues that they face. So I think that by opening these opportunities, students come up with issues that they identify and then understand these issues and then explore these issues. And with that, I think they bring it back to work on these issues in their sustainable design option studio projects and also in their thesis projects. And so now may I ask Professor Sam Joyce to actually continue and share with us what they do, because he has been with the students in Ujima and then in Japan also. And he's also the director of our MARC program. So yes, Sam, please.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Erwin. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think when we wanted to do this presentation for sort of external experience from SUTD, we wanted to focus on a few specific instances where we've done collaborations and we've looked at what the influence of and the impact of doing trips abroad are. So whilst we've done a lot of work, going to places like like Thailand, like Vietnam, like Switzerland, like London, many places. We wanted to highlight a few specific instances because we think what's interesting is actually the kind of, the impact on someone who goes and visits. I think it's also important to kind of iterate what Erwin said, that, whilst we might not be able to do this right now, this is an important part of architecture to sort of build connections, to build ideologies and thoughts about what architecture can be and should be for the citizens of the world, and to see how we do that. So what we think is really interesting about Inujima is that it's almost like a sort of mini Singapore. It's like a little test ground for new ideas. And what's more exciting is that we have Kazuyo Sejima, a multi-awarded architect who's also thinking about these ideas. And we're working together to kind of think up new ways of thinking about architecture. So what I wanted to do is sort of show how some of these experiences of visiting the island translated into projects that were undertaken over a number of different visits. So one of the things that we were doing is that we courtesy of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Singapore, we've had yearly funding to kind of support students to travel twice a year, in some cases to Inujima and also to Tokyo and to Kyoto, and other places in Japan. And I think what's interesting about that is it helps us kind of think about, in this case, the unique features of Inujima that are, even being unique, are relevant in Singapore. So one of the main things that Inujima has a critical issue of is an aging population. So a population who enjoy where they live. It's a beautiful place. It's sort of surrounded by nature, and they like where they are, but they want to live there longer and have healthy sort of living circumstances. So one of the interesting projects that was done by Mok Jong-wei, who also won an award later in the Masters for a separate project, did a great project on Inujima, kind of looking at how elderly populations might live more sustainably and more in unison with younger population. So this is a sort of an interesting synergy of another group of people that need care of orphanages, and looking at how we can kind of promote more people within this island. So this was his project. If we move on, there's another sort of interesting dimension to Inujima, which is tourism, and that's an important aspect within Singapore, but also within Japan. Both of these sort of developed countries are go-to destinations. They gain a lot of economic benefit from there, but also there's an immense ability to look into how we can create interesting architecture to engage visitors and present our culture or the culture of the island. So in this case, actually this area is quite famous for octopus, for raising octopus and eating octopus. So they have quite a unique way of farming them in sort of small kind of bottles that are put into the sea. But there's another way of kind of a nursery, if you will, of teaching people about octopus. So whilst there's some octopus that you can eat, other octopus are endangered or need sort of more careful care. So this is an opportunity to kind of interact with this unique, highly intelligent animal. Another project, which was actually one of my master's students a couple of years ago, Ying Ying, she did this amazing project, which won an award that year, which was about thinking about how technology can help us to preserve customs, local customs and local activities, and also sort of potentially keep a place going. So this is actually something that also, the Singapore government are interested in, of like, how do we assist people in a way that is culturally sensitive to what they're doing, and also helps other people to understand, kind of what the actions are. So in this case, she proposed a really beautiful project where the elderly people would teach robots how to do tasks that would help them out on a day-to-day basis. But in doing so, they would also be able to kind of show visitors how those tasks were done by the residents. They would help them do them over the day-to-day, even if they weren't able to do them. And therefore visitors would be able to understand how the island kind of worked and works, and to be a part of that history. My actual kind of area of expertise is specifically in technology and digital big data and machine learning. And whilst often that's kind of viewed as a very kind of hard subject, which is to say that, you know, it's a very technical undertaking, what's interesting in architecture is that there's a lot of emphasis on asking questions about how we're going to apply this in social settings. And I think architecture is important because it's a discipline that tries to improve people's quality of life, improve their day-to-day living. And this isn't necessarily such a sort of technical hard problem. It's nice to have a lot of space. It's nice to have, you know, a room that's the right temperature, etc. But a lot of these things are about how do we measure how happy people are, how much they're enjoying it, how they connect with friends and family and other people. So we've done a number of workshops where we've been interested in exploring data. And these are some of the workshops that we'll show. So one of the workshops that we did was in Kyoto and also in Inujima. And what we were interested in doing here is actually using Twitter data. So we had 12 million tweets in Kyoto, and we were asking some interesting questions in the D Lab, which you can see on the right and the left here. They have both an old, beautiful machiya. So we got the experience of sort of working like a craftsperson might do in a traditional house in Kyoto, but also in a very modern building in Kyoto, and kind of working on computation to kind of understand Kyoto more. So not only just experiencing it, we got to walk around, we got to go to some nice restaurants, we got to visit important temples and shrines, but also we were able to look at how can we capture some of this in an empirical and data-driven way. So the students worked with local students from Inujima, and actually some students came from Tokyo as well to participate, and some students from Italy and Slovenia as well, actually, that came to kind of partake in this workshop. And what we did is we walked around the city, and we tried to see what's interesting and important things that are critical to Kyoto. They give it its experience, and what things can we measure so we can look at how we can maybe improve them or change or design for them. So in this case, what students looked at was they looked at things like how can we cycle around? Kyoto is a very cycling friendly city, but sometimes it's hard to find parking spaces. Sometimes there are crashes and things like that. So how can we get data so that we can say, okay, these are maybe dangerous or hard places to cycle? How can we redesign the urban furniture and landscape to help that happen better? And in doing, there's an amazing amount of ability. So in this case, Twitter data, for example, we're able to see kind of where tourists are, where they get caught out when it's raining, for example. These are sort of looking at different sort of feelings, different kind of environmental kind of feelings. And also looking at the interaction between locals and tourists as well, which is an ever important sort of effect. So we were able to kind of understand these, both talking to the local students, but also sort of searching through the data and really understanding maybe where architecture can have a larger effect, being able to see the city in a very different way. And then finally, what was kind of very cool about this project is that, you know, it got so much interest that we were then able to kind of move it into Venice for the famous Venice Biennale. And this Venice Biennale, we built, this is actually the Singapore Pavilion in the bottom image. And we were, which SUTD helped to co-develop. And what we were able to do here is kind of do the same investigation, but in Venice. So not only were we able to experience Venice, but we were able to kind of see whether the data correlates with this. So what was really interesting about it is we were able to take these data sets, these Twitter data sets, and we were able to say, okay, this is where tourists are, this is where locals are, this is where people are during the day, this is where people are during the night, and this is where people are happy, this is where people are not so satisfied, this is where people are taking photos or eating or anything like that. So we're able to kind of look at these activities, you know, through a data eye, and really identify where these important areas are. And what's interesting is that even the Venetian guides that we had were kind of amazed by the insight that this had. They were kind of aware of this data, living there for tens of years, but we were able to see this using the data. So this is a very unique opportunity that we're able to do. And I think that sort of workshop kind of highlights maybe what we're trying to achieve in SUTD, which is we're trying to understand the sort of human condition and how we can design better for it, but we need to do that through human experience, through sort of compassion and talking to people and understanding what they need. And that's ultimately our role as architects. Okay, I think that's our little bit for now. I'm going to pass it back to our MCs.
So thank you, Prof Erwin and Prof Sam, and also Kendrick at Polita. So for a wonderful sharing about Kyoto and also the project that they did in Singapore. So we'll just leave the questions to the end. So without further ado, this is a QR code actually. Without further ado, we will invite Prof Rene to share about his work as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. It's of course very exciting preparing for it. But trying to condense everything down to 5 slides has been very difficult. So we have 15 and a lot of stories to tell, but I just want to say some preliminary comments first. I think this international exposure idea for students rooted in going to school in Singapore is a very good one. And in the past few years, we have been fortunate and lucky to have been invited by Erwin and the school to lead a studio that took students to Europe. And sometimes I ask myself, why would we even do that? And I think for a variety of reasons, we do the European studios precisely because as a form of balancing the education in Singapore. There are already studios doing projects and in Asia, and including Japan. So I always felt that doing something in Europe would provide a counterpoint to the lessons that the students would do. And another reason is I never quite saw the world in terms of north or south or east or west, but I think things that are relevant to us, architects, students and professionals, is that there is a certain amount of shared legacy and common values that I think transcend all boundaries. And especially today, it's not difficult to move from one place to the other. And another reason why I thought we could do that, or at least I could lead the students, is I myself had such an education. And I always saw it as an opportunity to just share and hand down lessons that I myself had picked up. And I've always been very grateful to ideas and lessons learned. And the worst is not being able to share them to a new generation of students. Next, please. Yeah, this is an important slide because it cannot be underestimated that all this can happen, because SUTD itself, from our point of view, has a very well balanced curriculum, and Erwin's leadership is important because he's the person who has this big vision for the school, and we are very happy to participate in it. And I think Erwin is not just a great dean. He's a dean who knows the school well, who knows the curriculum well, who knows the faculty well as the students well, and has in fact participated in some of these trips with us. Yeah, next. Yeah. I sometimes reflect and ask myself as teachers, how can we make lessons interesting and relevant? The Europe studios are really a design studio, but we don't just want to do design. We want to combine it with some knowledge of history and theory as well. And also, we want to embrace, of course, the growing trend of travel and globalization and seeing things. So this is a very important tripartite relationship between design, history, and travel. And I think the most important thing was how do we put in some sense of fun in all this experience. Next. For instance, last year before COVID hit, actually now two years ago, in 2019, we took the students to Paris to look at the works of Le Corbusier. And just before we got on the trip, the Notre Dame actually caught fire. So the whole idea was to take students to France, even on a road trip, to search out the works of these great past masters and treat this whole experience as lessons outside the classroom and beyond boundaries. Because I personally feel, ironically, the school is the worst place for anyone to really study architecture. We really need to get out there and see things. Next. And I think architecture is not just about looking at buildings, it's really lessons beyond architecture itself. And when we took the students to France, to Paris, we had some introductory lectures on what France has been as a nation, how artists, intellectuals have come and actually made France and Paris a great place to live and to experience life itself. And not to forget the sort of things that France has contributed to what we know about the world today. Next. Yes, so these are some images showing the students in Venice, in Florence. And what is also important, learning and sharing on the move. We would normally get the students to do some research, assign them some buildings, and they would need to share during bus trips between cities, or even on the lower right, we were at the San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, and a student was picked and asked to research it and be a sort of leader and actually explain the relevance of Palladio to the rest of his cohort. Next. This is an important slide, and people from the Florence studio, can you please step in and share some of your experiences, especially relating to these images? Anyone?
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle, and I took a professional Rene studio on 2019 for the Florence and Brunelleschi. So this is the image that when we are like going to the site itself, which is Florence with its rich historical fabric. And it's very fun because we could experience it directly to see the magnificent creation of Brunelleschi. It's very surreal, and we also sketch there. And maybe Junwon and Michelle and Rebecca can add on.
I think like most importantly for me is like being in a company of like everyone in the studio. We have like the same interest, and the kind of conversations we have and the kind of learnings we have from one another is like what's the most meaningful to me, because we learn a lot from one another from when we study it on like 2D on computers. But when we are actually there, I remember how like many of us had to rethink our project because we experienced so much more, like the context, the ambience, and the sense of scale is just different. And your sensitivity sort of heightens when you are really in the space, and you really have some unexpected conversations or encounter that can really enrich like your project. So yeah, I think that's quite important. And,
anyone else?
We feel that like looking at it like physically, not through our screen and not through any 3D model in the vinyl, is definitely different than experiencing it in real life and looking at the Duomo, looking at the Piazza, whole experience of the overseas studio trip.
How did it feel
It's
sketching?
to
Sorry.
if I were to add on, I think one thing that was constantly emphasized in the studio was how important, while architecture is amazing, it's also important to enjoy life, because that is how we create beautiful spaces and make better architecture as well.
Very good. Hey, thanks, guys. And I should add that Junwen is actually joining us live from the Netherlands, and he made this special effort to call in, and we are very grateful.
Thank you.
His involvement. But everyone has forgotten to mention the most important thing about this slide. It is really to sketch and to use one's eyes and hands to express things, to balance out other methods of discovery, because these days no one sketches, I realize, whether in school or even in the office. So the idea was to really take these students there to look at things and to really think about it and recreate the proportions of the Villa Rotunda, rather than just using their mobile phones and their mouse. Next. This is one of my favorite slides, because I think teaching architecture is not just about busting our asses in a studio twice a week, but really living the moment and the past. These are some slides. On the top left is taken during the Brunelleschi studio. We were in Florence, and we took the students to this restaurant where Michelangelo himself had dined in. And on the right, during the Paris studio, we actually went to this restaurant where Le Corbusier was said to have had a glass of wine on his way to his office and back every day. And again, these trips abroad allows us to visit museums and allows us a broader appreciation of the world. Seeing Michelangelo close up, or even Botticelli at the Uffizi, I think these are things that are important, not just in the education of an architect, but in the development of as simple as a human being. Next. Yeah, special mention must be made for this last studio that I just did with an incredible set of 12 students just last semester. It's this virtual traveling studio to the eternal city of Rome. I've been putting off this Rome studio for a while because of scheduling. And then when COVID came along, I thought at least that we would wait and do it another time. However, I must say we continued with our intentions, and we did it because I felt that COVID or no COVID, life must move on, school must move on, and Rome is a place that I think everyone of any discipline should experience. So we brought the students to Rome, but to experience the history, and we even spoke a little bit about the Roman Empire, which I think all students should know the ABCs of. Next. And I show this slide because Rome is not just about monuments. We did a Bernini and a Borromini studio, where the intention was to learn from these past great sculptors and architects and apply lessons to contemporary design. But Rome is such a rich city. It has hosted the Olympics. It's got the monuments of Hadrian and the Pantheon. And it's also really a city of music. And the reason I like to show this because I think COVID or no COVID, nothing should really stop us at pursuing our love and our passion for our shared heritage, whether we come from the East or the West. Next. And of course, we need to embrace technology and preserve the studio culture, which of course we are trying to develop at the SUTD. And thanks to YouTube and Zoom, we were able, with the students, to talk, to visit Rome, to have virtual walks, to do even 2 projects, and under very difficult and somewhat sometimes also frustrating relationships and conditions. Next. Yes, and these are just some examples of student work from Florence, from Venice. Students will analyze the proportions of Palladio, build models of Brunelleschi, and then on the lower right, really try to apply the lessons to things that they would design. Next. Yes, and some works showing the Paris studio. Everyone had a chance to redesign the great roof of the great cathedral. And this past semester, also students did 2 projects without actually visiting Rome. And I must say the results have been very encouraging. Next. And then at the end of it, we have reviews. And I always saw reviews as a celebration of the journey of what we learn and we experience. We share, we get each other excited about the education of architecture, and not just about the development of students, but of people in the profession, and even people like me and my teaching team at RT+Q Architects. Next. Good. This is the last slide, and I say common values is because I think as a group of people, students, professors, teachers, participants, we come from a variety of backgrounds. But once I think when we step into SUTD, we must focus on our common values, and our common values is to acquire knowledge, have fun, and as a teacher used to tell us, I think the role of teachers and professors is not to fill the students' minds with lessons, but the direct opposite. In fact, its role is really to open up our minds and to see the world and to learn. And I hope this studio will continue, whether in the COVID or no COVID era. Thanks. I think that's about it from us.
So actually, thank you, Prof Rene, for the
Great.
wonderful sharing. Yeah, so now we actually move on to the moderated Q&A session. So just a quick reminder to the audience that you can actually scan the QR code as shown now, or you can directly throw the question into the chat. So we actually have a few questions that already came in. So one of the questions is actually, so will such overseas trip be subsidized, especially for students in the lower income band?
Sam, maybe you can answer that.
Yes.
So yeah, more often than not, we support students to do these trips. And also, I think, we also find interesting ways of getting funding in other locations as well. So yeah, typically the trips are supported, but also we go beyond that. So for example, we've had this JCCI funding, which has enabled sort of 2 trips a year. We even got it last year, but sadly we couldn't spend any of it. But it's okay. They've given it to us this year as well. So we really try and do our best to help support students to go through, even if it's difficult for them to afford it. So we do try and make that possible.
Okay, thank you. So I have a next question. So how would students actually juggle their own modules in school when they're actually on this exchange, essentially?
Oh, maybe I can answer that a little bit as well. So some of the trips, I mean, as in Rene's brilliant case, are actually integrated into into the studio. And maybe, if you're not aware, the studio is a very large percentage of the of the taught part of the university. Practicing and architecture, it's a practice, so you have to try and work on architecture. We also have obviously the technical side of things. So for a lot of the trips that are held, for in those instances, they might be held during the term break, or they might be held on the understanding from other faculty members if they are during term time. The Inujima trips also, some of them are what are called independent activity period, which is a great opportunity to investigate and see other things. So I know Erwin and myself have held trips to, for example, Switzerland, to Japan as well during the IAP period, the independent activity period. So they don't clash with the term. So they're sort of on top of existing studio. Yeah.
So another question. So I believe Prof Viray shared about Kyoto, Rene shared about Rome. So actually one of the students actually asked, so what other trips are available for students to sign up for?
We also have trips around Southeast Asia. And so we have trips to Indonesia. Like there was a studio that actually was doing the conservation for the orangutan, and they were working with the NGO group. So I think they went to Surabaya. And then we also have the trips to Vietnam, where there was a kindergarten that was built with the sponsorship of Capital Land. And then so around Southeast Asia, we have a number of trips. And then, of course, even in China also, we also have some trips, and even in Taiwan. And of course, Europe, because of the distance and then the cost of the trip, we have to be very strategic with it and do it very carefully. But for Europe, I think that Rene would always lead the studios that actually deal with the cities, which I think would be very good venues for learning about architecture and about life. And recently, I think we had an Instagram workshop in Switzerland with Herzog and de Meuron, the architects of the Beijing Olympic Stadium. And then Kendrick, are you there? So maybe you can share a little bit about that studio also.
Yes.
IAP, yes.
Yes, the IAP. So for that project, the IAP was a joint workshop together with SUTD, the officers of Herzog and de Meuron, and the Kyoto Institute of Technology, where we actually tried to look at how social media has actually influenced how architecture is seen today in modern life, where really, as mentioned by Rene just now, that in these times of pandemic, we all need to look at different ways of seeing. So that workshop was one of the ways that we tried to explore these things. And it was very nice to actually have the support of Herzog and de Meuron, who actually wanted to explore this, and it was super timely as well. Yeah. To synchronize it together with the term time, we conducted this trip during the breaks. So the students were able to participate in the workshop, but at the same time still be able to balance their academic workloads for it.
Thank you, Kendrick.
Thank you.
We have another question by Madhu. He actually asked, so is there actually a fixed percentage of international students for the intake into the master's program? And actually, what is such intake?
Sam.
Sorry. I think we do have certain caps on that. I don't know if this is the right sort of forum to share that information. But we do try very conscientiously to bring in, great students from Singapore and all over the world. We recently just opened up the cohort, which has been really exciting for us because we've seen, people potentially come in from the kind of Indian origin, but have come in from America, people coming in from Germany, and also sort of Southeast Asia. So yeah, it's not entirely appropriate for us to sort of share that sort of figure, but we do have a sizable number of international students, and we're very supportive of those that do come and that we let in. Yeah.
So another question that is more directed to the forum actually. So actually to Prof Viray. So regarding the trip to Inojima, so actually does one actually have to be very fluent in Japanese to go for it?
Can you repeat the question, Wahin? Sorry.
So regarding the trip to Inojima, so does one actually have to be very fluent in Japanese to really like learn more there?
Not really. I think that it was fascinating because Ying, the student who was doing the master's project, actually did not know Japanese, but she was having a conversation with the residents of the island, and I think that it's actually the heart that is very important, because even if the language is not there, you could actually communicate, and I think that is the testament to the possibility of communication beyond the language. Because we seem to be very comfortable with the fact that, oh, we could all speak maybe English in some form. But sometimes being unable to, and then trying to speak without this common language, by observing people and then trying to look at the circumstances, we can actually guess what is happening. And then so a form of communication happens. So of course, knowing a bit of Japanese is helpful, because as an experience, knowing a bit of the language of the place you're going to actually expands your horizon also, because it can open a new world to you too. I hope that helps. Thank you.
So now we have another question. This is directed to Prof Rene actually. So actually, what's the difference between a virtual tour around Rome and also the physical tour around Rome? Since maybe like everyone actually can't actually venture overseas last year.
Of course, they are somewhat different, because I think when you are able to be in a place, to actually travel to Rome, you actually get a better sense of the place and the spaces around you. I think that's important. But given the constraints of the pandemic, I think the virtual visits were also very helpful, because technology is such that it can help us see things that we sometimes do not see by ourselves. Because if you were to do an actual walking tour of Rome, you may do it once. But if you look at virtual tours, you can actually get 50 other tours. So I think it balances the two experiences out in a rather positive way, both ways. So I think the best situation is to do both, go to Rome and maybe assign some time and look at Zoom videos as well, because technology will teach us to see things that we would not commonly see. And I must say that the results that we got out of the Rome studio this time was very good. I was very surprised, and I'm very encouraged to actually get up and do another studio, perhaps with another city, with the next cohort. And I don't know if you guys can see this wonderful model that I have with me. You can't quite see it, but it's actually the work of a student, Jeff, of a part of a Bernini sculpture. And while we had to rely on virtual means to experience Bernini at the Galleria Borghese in Rome, students like Jeff has shown that we can actually produce tangible results without having to even go there. And I think such is the power of technology, as well as the curiosity and of course the hardworkingness of the SUTD students in particular, that has made this experience just as good. Yeah.
Maybe we should jump in now. So we three of us took like the last studio with Rene.
Yes.
And we couldn't really go overseas like our predecessors lah. So like what Prof say, we rely very heavily on our YouTube and Google Earth and everything online. Yeah, so we had a lot of discussions throughout. Talk to him, and he like give us his thoughts on certain things. And because like the parts that we worked on were in ruins, and we didn't really have much to work with, so we did a lot of studying of other edifices also. Then we add on our own takes on the works lah. Yeah.
Good. Anyone from that studio who's tuned in, feel free to add to the discussion. If nothing else, I have to remind you guys that you all are still for the studio a studio book. Okay, we have managed to put together 3 books of the previous studios: Florence, Paris, and Venice. So we are waiting for the Rome one to come out.
Okay. Oh, anyways, in the interest of time, we have actually just one last question. So, someone actually asked, like, what is the possibilities of like turning, like finishing this studio and then actually translating them to potential internship or job opportunities?
Oh, maybe I can answer that a little bit. I mean, I think that's one of the really exciting things that we're seeing with the students in terms of, I think what's nice about SUTD specifically is that we have a, relatively broad kind of international reach. So we know students now that are working full-time in Japan. We've had students that have done internships in some of the offices that we've gone on tours with in Japan. I think similar activities kind of in Europe and in other parts of the world as well. So it's quite interesting. We now have sort of students that are working sort of full time in Hong Kong and in other parts of the world. And maybe eventually they'll come back to Singapore or kind of visit other parts and work in other parts of the world. But we've definitely seen it translate to internships, but also actually full-time positions. So this is very exciting, I think, and it's an important part of experiencing other parts of the world and maybe bringing some of that learning back to Singapore in the end. Yeah.
So okay, so we have come to an end actually. So thank you everyone for being here today. So thank you panelists.
I think Rene's got something to say.
Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, I was just saying we have come to the end of today. So thank you everyone. Thank you Prof Viray, Prof Rene, and Prof Sam, and also all the student speakers and also the audiences. So actually, today hasn't ended. Now we're actually moving on to the creative coding workshop next by Prof Jason. So for the participants, they are in this chat now. You can actually move on to the next meeting. We'll be starting probably at 2:45. So have a toilet break and we can continue from there. So thank you everyone for being here today. We'll see everyone again later or next time. Thank you.
Yep. Hope to see you in SUTD. All right. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye.